the Living Faith, everyone. We're glad that you decided to join us. Happy Mother's Day. Welcome to you down in Cafe du Jour. Glad that you're here. We're in a series called Leaving Your Baggage Behind. And when I started this series right after Easter, I'd planned to go about 5 weeks to Mother's Day and make this the last day. But I started to realize we got a lot of baggage. And so I've extended the series out to at least Father's Day, and we'll see if it may even go beyond that, because we do carry a lot of luggage around. This morning I'm going to read a text. I didn't bring my baggage. I'm going to talk about some baggage that you see. One of the very first stories, one of the oldest family stories in the Bible. And when the Bible talks about family and marriage, it's really pretty unsentimental about life and about marriage and about family. The Bible basically says that not being married is really hard, and sometimes it's devastating. And it also says that being married is very hard, and sometimes it's just devastating. And it's kind of unnerving how unsentimental it is. And I've tried to talk about some of my baggage. We get baggage and blessing from our families, and I've tried to talk about both those over the years. And you see that too in the Scriptures. Now, outside of Christian circles, the world is pretty cynical about family and about marriage. And, the proof of that is just watch television, just watch sitcoms or movies. Pretty cynical about fathers, about mothers, about children. And you get it, because it's hard, right? I mean, marriage and kids and family, it's just difficult. So you get the cynicism, or I do. I can see how they get that way. On the other hand, you have these, in Christian circles, you have this idea that, family, that's the perfect life. Get the white picket fence and the kids, and everything is really about marriage. And of course, that's utterly wrong too. Neither one of those are biblical view. Jesus didn't come along and say, now marriage, that's what you really need. That's what life is about, and having the kids and the picket fence. There are tremendous difficulties, and Christ, of course, points to himself as what we're needed. But I want to go back to one of the very first family stories. That's one that many of you probably know. It's in Genesis. It's in chapter 29. And I want to read it. I'm going to read the entire story, and then I'm going to back into it a lot of what's going on rather than setting up. Many of you know this story. It's about Jacob and him leaving home. And I'll read it. If you don't understand it, I'll backload some information into it to help us learn from it. But there's a beautiful reality here, and it's unnerving because it's kind of unsettling how unsentimental it is. But it's about grace and suffering that we've talked a lot about throughout this series, and how family is both. Now, after Jacob had been with Laban for a month, Laban said to him, "Just because you're a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing?" This is after 1 month of work. "Tell me what your wages should be." Now, Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was lovely in form and beautiful. A lot of translations do a lot of different translations with weak eyes, soft eyes, tender eyes. Basically, it's just saying she's not as beautiful as Rachel. I mean, that's really what's going on there. Jacob was in love with Rachel, and he said, "Look, I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." 7 years. Take your salary, men, multiply it times 7, and that's what he's given to marry Rachel. Laban said, "Hey, it's better that I should give her to you than some other man." He doesn't say yes. He just says, "It's better that I should give her to you than some other man. Stay here with me. Work the 7 years." So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel. By then, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban, "Hey, 7 years, give me my wife. My time's completed. I want to lie with her." So Laban brought together all the people of the place, and he gave a feast, big party, big wedding feast, lasted a week. And when evening came, he took his daughter Leah, and he gave her to Jacob, and Jacob lay with her. Now, they'd been drinking a lot. Jacob was, pretty soused. And so when morning came, behold, it was Leah. How'd you like that as a wedding gift from your father-in-law? So Jacob said to Laban, "What is this you've done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" You can't say in Hebrew, you can't say what the Hebrew really says here. It's pretty intense. You can imagine. And Laban said, "Well, it's not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week, and then we'll give you the younger one also in return for another 7 years of work." And Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter, Rachel, to be his wife, and Jacob lay with Rachel also, and he loved Rachel more than Leah. He loved Rachel more than Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. Now, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he opened her womb, though Rachel was barren. And Leah became pregnant. And she gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, which basically means, I've been seen. It is because the Lord has seen my misery. I'm being noticed. Surely my husband will love me now. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said, because the Lord has heard me, now I'm being listened to. Heard, and I'm not loved. He gave me this one too. So he named him Simeon, Shema, to hear, to listen. Now I'll be listened to. And again she conceived. Certainly my husband will love me now. When she gave birth to a son, she said, now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I've borne him 3 sons. So she named him Attachment, Levi, attached to. And she conceived yet again. And when she gave birth to a son, she said, this time, I will praise Yahweh. So she named him Judah. And then she stopped having children. Now, to get the gist of the story, Jacob had a grandfather named Abraham. And God came to Abraham, and he said, Abraham, do you see how messed up life is? Do you see the pain and the hurt and the misery and the cruelty and the injustice and the disease and all the monkey business going on? Abraham, I'm going to do something about it. And I'm going to do something about it through you. I'm going to redeem the world, reconcile the world, heal the world through you. One of your descendants is going to be a Messiah that's going to bring about a change. There's going to be a seed that gets passed on through you every generation, and you need to know that, Abraham, and it's going to happen. There's going to be children, lots of children, but one of the children will be the chosen one, the one that I choose to work through, a specific child, a messianic seed, and that child's going to know about me and learn about me and lead in my direction, and it's going to be this. It's going to come through this seed, and then one day it's going to be the Messiah. Someday there'll be the seed that is the seed, not just one of you, but the seed, and he's going to be the priest of priests and the prophet of prophets and the king of kings and the Lord of lords. And you need to know that, Abraham. That's what I am doing. And Jacob's family was chosen that way, and they were very special that way. They were a family of grace as well as a family of suffering. Now, Abraham had a son, Isaac. Isaac had 2 kids. And God said very clearly, the seed is Jacob. Not the older, but the younger. And Isaac showed a lot of favoritism toward Esau, not toward Jacob. And it had a horrible effect on them. A horrible effect. Isaac just kind of ignored what God said and said, this is the kid I'm going to show my favor to. So he did. And he showed favor toward this son. And they were ravaged by it. The family was ravaged by it. Esau grew up thinking, that he was special and that he was it. And Jacob became a manipulator, a liar, a player, someone that used other people, because that was how he got attention. While Esau became kind of this spoiled little brat. And so Jacob deceives his father. And he leaves. And that's why he ends up with Laban. Esau vows to kill him. So Jacob's gone, and he's not coming back because he's got this brother that's angry at him. And Jacob's life is pretty much over. I mean, he's done. He doesn't have much of a faith. He doesn't know if God screwed up or he screwed up or the situation got screwed up. He has this vision when he goes, and he says, well, if you're really God and I come back. It's a really weak statement. It's really pathetic when you read about it because God's doing something. He's kind of like, yeah, whatever. But his life's over. He has no faith. He has no money. He has no job. He has no career. He's in this place. Laban takes him in and says, I guess you're related somehow. I'll give you the job of a shepherd, which is like a nothing job. He's a charity case for Laban. So Laban takes him in, gives him this nothing paying job as a shepherd. And then Laban notices, this guy's got skill. This guy's good. I can make some money out of this guy if I make him a foreman. So he makes him a foreman. And offers to pay him. But Jacob knows he can make a lot of money if he doesn't have to pay Jacob too much. So they get into this deal about, what are your wages? And then we pick up the story. You see, Jacob met his match in Laban. Laban was more of a player and a manipulator than Jacob was. He'd had 25 years at it. So he is really playing Jacob to the hilt here. He's solving two problems. One, he's getting a lot of work for nothing. So he's getting really rich off this guy. The second thing is he has this older daughter who's not that attractive. That's kind of a weight around him because he can't really get her married. And so he sees, wow, I can kill two birds with one stone. I can marry her, get that problem solved, and I can make myself a ton of money. And there's a lot that you can say about all that's going on, but what they're saying is that these two girls, they're not quite women yet. They're becoming women. And the fact is, Rachel is drop dead gorgeous, and Leah is just ugly. She just is. I mean, that's exactly what that text is saying, and it's saying it pretty frank, pretty brutal. I know. And so Laban is going to solve both of these problems. But notice Laban never says, yes, I'll give her to you. He just says, well, why should I marry her to someone else? So when the time comes, he said, hey, Jacob, you didn't read the fine print? So you see the maneuvering and the playing that's going on. Jacob's pretty happy at the wedding feast. He's drunk, which, that's not the horrible thing about the thing. They'd be drinking a lot. And, of course, he ends up with Leah. Jacob's thinking, finally, I'm getting some consolation for my problems. Finally, all this work, I've been here 7 years, I've been working, I'm away from family. Finally, something good's going to happen to me. Finally, my life's going to get on a roll. I'm going to have kids, and life's going to be good. But the Hebrew literally says, but when morning came, behold, it was Leah. And Leah's life is thrown into a living hell because of these men's greed, both of them, and because of their manipulation. Her life is just ravaged, and you could see it in there. I mean, you can't read that without feeling sorry for her. And, of course, you see that in our society, too. Our society is not much different than what you read in that culture. She's not only married to a man that doesn't love her, she's married to a man that loves the other person right with her who happens to be her sister. Now, just imagine that scenario. I mean, imagine how... It's hard to imagine what Leah had to live with. Day in, day out, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And it's important to get that. I mean, this is one of the most mournful texts in the entire Scriptures of what this woman's having to go through. Then she begins to have children. And what's her logic? I'm not noticed. I'm not seen. When I am seen, I'm not somebody wants to look at me, but I'm going to be seen now because I had a kid. And the culture says that's what makes me bad. So I'm going to name my kid, I'm seen, Reuben. Reuben means I'm being noticed now. Now my husband will love me. Does he? No. She has another kid. And this is horrible. This is painful to read this. It's painful to read this. Months go by. Crap, that didn't work. He didn't see me any more than he did before. I have another kid. Simeon, Sema. I'm never listened to. My opinion doesn't count. What I say gets ignored. Rachel always gets listened to, but not me. Well, I'll be listened to now. Now my husband will listen to me when I say my opinion. Now my vote will count. Now when I want to do something, it'll matter. And I won't get, it's just Leah. Now my husband will love me. You start crying when you read this. That doesn't work. She has a third child. Man, she is on a roll. She is on fire. And that's very valued in this. And they're boys too, so it's like even better for her. I'm going to name this one Attached because I'm not attached. No one really wants to hang out with me or be a part of my life. So I'm going to name this one Levi. Now I'll be attached. Now I'll be wanted. Now they'll want to hang out with me because I got these kids all around me. And nothing else will hang out with me because of the kids. Surely my husband's going to love me now. Every time she thinks, it never happens. And then finally we read the fourth child, this time, forget this husband stuff. I'm going to praise Yahweh, Judah. And she named him Judah. There's a lot of lessons to pull out from there. And as you let that story land in you, and if you just sit with it and learn to sit with these stories and get the big idea. You know, you don't have to get myopic and answer a lot of trivial, tedious questions about Scripture, but you want to get the big idea. Put the dots together. What's going on here? Some powerful lessons in here. 3 lessons that are bad news and 3 lessons that are good news. There's really a whole lot of lessons, but I want to look at 3 in the time we have. And the good news is gooder than the bad news, but the bad news is pretty bad. And the first thing that you see, the first bad news is you never do sin. Sin does you. That's a statement by Tim Keller that I thought was brilliant. You never sin. You never do sin. Sin does you. You know, we think that, we do a sin, we break God's law, we lie, we use somebody, you trample on someone. It's just an event. It's just an action. No, it's not. No, you don't do sin. Sin does you. The Bible says when you sin, it's not just an event. You create and you release a devastating power that careens around your life. And it just kind of, and that's bad news because we're all sinners. And we've all done it. Look at what Isaac does to Jacob. How he favors Esau. Think of the devastation that wrecks throughout that family. Jacob learns that lesson, doesn't he? About favoring someone. So what does he do? He carries on the same monkey business, doesn't he? And he favors Rachel over Leah. And that wreaks havoc, untold pain and horror. That's why God is about don't sin, because of the havoc that it wreaks. What happens with Leah and Rachel? Many of you know the story. What goes on to happen? Leah's kids hate Rachel's kids. And I can't say that's strong enough. And if you know the story, you know. I mean, they take Rachel's oldest kid decades later, Joseph, the dreamer, and what do they do with him? Well, first they want to kill him. They hate this guy. Well, I wonder where they learned that. I wonder where they learned this comparison and favoring and all that stuff. And they end up selling him as a slave? A slave? That's pretty intense hate. And then what happens later on? And by the way, who's suffering now from all this? Jacob. And then this story gets horrible. I mean, it's horrible. Later, they're starving to death. They got to go to Egypt. The brothers go down. If you know the story, I won't get into all the details, but basically, Benjamin doesn't go. Rachel had 2 kids, Joseph and Benjamin, right? Joseph's gone now forever in Jacob's scenario and understanding. The only reminder he has left of Rachel is Benjamin. And what happens when the brothers come back? We have to take Benjamin with us. Put yourself in Jacob's shoes. You know you're not taking Benjamin. You are not taking Binyamin. My right-hand man is literally what it means. And they said, we can't go back and get food unless we take Binyamin. Jacob said, forget you. I'm not doing it. They almost starve. The brothers finally said, look, Dad, we could have been there and back. We're taking him. Jacob doesn't have really much choice. He's got 4 sons that are dying, and Benjamin's the meal ticket. Well, what's Jacob going through? You're going to take the only memory I got left of Rachel? Yeah. And he kind of figures maybe something happened with Joseph. Do you see what that sin does you? You don't do sin, sin does you. And and it goes on and on. Lie begets lie. Sin begets sin. Hell begets hell. You don't do sin, sin does you. Second bad news. There's good news coming, moms. But there's more bad news. The text says, in the morning, behold, it was Leah. And I want to be careful how I say this. I love Leah, and I want to protect Leah. And when you read this story, you can't help but love her. You see why God loves her. But she represents something that's not good. And it's not her, it's just what she represents. The text literally, and behold, in the morning, it was Leah. There's a cosmic disappointment in our life. There's a cosmic disillusionment. Leah feels it. I'm going to have kids. That's going to be my life. That's going to have fulfillment. It doesn't. Rachel feels it. Jacob feels it. Jacob's saying, finally I'm going to have happiness. Finally I'm going to get Rachel. And behold, in the morning, it was Leah. There's a commentator named Kidner who talks about that. And he talks about this is a miniature of our disillusionment experience from Eden onwards. And he's saying, no matter what your hopes are, what your project is, what your goal is, marriage, career, love, in the morning, it's always Leah. No matter what you think is Rachel, it's always Leah. C.S. Lewis probably put it the best when he talked about hope, and C.S. Lewis says it this way. He says, most people, if they really learn to look into their own heart, and that's what I'm encouraging you to do, if you really learn to look into your own heart, be real with yourself. Do what the Bible does with these people and, have that real talk in the mirror. Most people, if they really learn to look into their own hearts, would know that they do want, and want acutely, something that cannot be had in this world. There are all sorts of things in this world that offer to give it to you, but they never keep their promise. The longings which arise in us when we first fall in love, or we first think of some foreign country, how cool it'd be to visit there. I'd add, some vacation. Or we first take up some subject that excites us. We think, golly, this subject is the best. It's great. I love it. Our longings which no marriage, no travel, no learning can ever really satisfy. I am not speaking of what would ordinarily be called unsuccessful marriages or failures of holidays and so on. I am speaking of the very best possible ones. There's always something we have grasped at. There's always something in that first moment of longing, but it fades away in the reality. The spouse may be a good spouse. The scenery has been excellent. It turned out to be a good job, but it's evaded us. As Kidner says, it's in the morning, it's always Leah. And you see that. You hear it in our lives. You hear it in how we go about life. I'm going to have this career. I'm going to have this vacation. I'm going to get this job. I'm going to retire with this type of lifestyle. I'm going to get myself this. I'm going to get a good-looking guy or a good-looking gal, and then I'm going to be happy. And life's going to go on, and I'm going to get there. But in the morning, it's always Leah. It's bad news. It's bad news. We feel it in our soul. And eventually you will see that. Eventually we all wake up to that. We've been talking a little bit about that with our baggage, and there's a lot more I could say, but I'm gonna leave it there. So the first bad news is that sin does us. We don't do sin. The second one is there's this cosmic disillusionment that we all feel in our soul. Even if our lives are great and we have everything, you still feel that inside your soul. And thirdly is that we make lives worse through idolizing. And specifically, we make life worse through idolizing family. And especially in our circles, in conservative circles. That sounds strange, perhaps, to some of you. But we put our hope in something to give us a sense of being loved or valuable or meaningful. And in the conservative world, we're taught, well, this is how you have the perfect family. And we tend to think that way. Leah thought that. If I had a child, finally she gave up, it didn't work. It didn't work. And when you build your life on that, when you build your life on the perfect family, the white picket fence, the perfect kids, all that, the Bible comes against that. Some of you are like, well, wait a minute, I thought the Bible came against like orgies and adultery and sex outside. Well, it does. It comes against that too. But that's not our text this morning. This text comes against this idolizing family. That's the big idea here. And if you build your life on that, if you build your life on a spouse, at the very best, you'll be emotionally dependent upon that spouse, or controlling, or judgmental and condemning of them for not meeting your need, for not doing things the way they want. And if anything goes wrong, if you have any problems, you'll go to pieces. And you won't be much good for your spouse or for your kids or really for anyone. You'll try to live your life through your children. And perhaps they'll hate you or not want to be around you. Or they just won't have any identity of their own except you living through them. And, at worst, people end up abusing their kids because of that. Because, the kids have got to be good. It may be verbal. And so they always get hammered on. And the parent has to be right. And they've got to love you. They've got to value you, or you don't have a life. And so your life is dependent upon that. And you see that. Leah, again and again, a son. A son. She really fit in with what the world taught her at that time. That was the traditional view, and at that time, that was pretty much true. And if she had had a nicer husband, she might have got away with the disillusionment a little bit longer. The fact that her husband was what he was made it worse. But idols always make the disappointment of this world far, far worse. I think that's why a lot of moms struggle with guilt. I really do, because of the conservative view that we say this is what mom should be, and we platform that, we make it what it is, and there's a lot of guilt in that. And I think a lot of moms have been taught that. And it's well-meaning. I've taught that. I used to teach that at Mother's Day. And one day I started interviewing mothers after 3 or 4 years of preaching Mother's Day, and I said, what do you like about Mother's Day? And hey, a lot of times they didn't like the message because it was how great moms were, and they didn't feel like measured up. That kind of threw me for a loop. So I kind of changed my tactic. That was decades ago, back when I lived in Iowa. So that's the bad news, but let's talk about the good news. We got about 10, 12, 15 minutes. And it's really, really good news. The good news is gooder than the bad news is bad. The first good news is that God works with weak people. God works with weak people. In a way, we hate this, though. We read this in the Bible, and you just don't like it. Look at Jacob. The guy's a polygamist. The guy's a bigamy. The Bible isn't for bigamy. It's not for polygamy. It doesn't teach that. And if we had time, we could look at that. And that's what Jacob's doing. And yet God works with this guy. I did a series years ago on Genesis where I had Woody come up and draw a picture when I was preaching on Jacob and what he was like. And, the guy's, this text shows the absolute misery and hell that these women are going through when they're treated like this by Jacob. And this whole thing that he's doing. And it just bothers us when we see that. And I think it's because we have a paradigm that is wrong. I think we look at the Bible and we want it to be a story of anecdotes, a story of spiritual inspiration stories. And then you get these stories. And by the way, there's a lot of these stories. David, Abraham, some of the stuff he did. They're throughout. And you read these stories, and you see this stupidity that goes on, the backstabbing here, the foolishness, the monkey business. And you say, what in the world is going on? Well, we want the Bible to be a book of virtues and tell us these inspirational stories. But that just shows that we really don't understand the gospel very well. We just don't. And it's hard. It's hard to understand it. It was hard in the early church for them to understand the gospel. We think we understand it because we can say a bunch of facts about it. But when it comes down to actually living out this gospel, it's a struggle for us. If you go read in Hebrews 11, the heroes of the faith, a lot of these people weren't heroes when it comes to virtue. A lot of them, how do they make the list? The Bible is not about role models. There are not many in there. And the ones that are in there aren't really platformed that much. Daniel, Joseph, Job, maybe. It's not about how great these people are. Again and again, God continues to work with weak people, even though they resist His grace, even though they ignore it or fight against it or turn their back on it. Why would God put these stories in His book? I mean, God, our theology, our beliefs is that God superintended these stories being in there. That, yeah, the writers wrote under their own personalities, but God was in control of putting this. That's our belief. Why would God do that? Man, put some better stories in there. Come on. Put something in that's inspiring, or at least a role model. Well, the inspiration is what God does. We want the Bible to be like a lot of other religious books, and the Bible's not like a lot of other religious books. That's not what it's trained to do to us. And that's why it's important, I think, to get the big idea that every other religion says God's at the top, and there's a ladder, and you do the right things, and you get up to the ladder. Yay! The Bible says you don't make it up that ladder. Look at these people. And yet God still works with weak people. That's great news for some of us. But at the other times, we just don't like it, or we struggle with it. We have this paradigm that goes against it. Perform, do good, live right, emulate the heroes. That's what a lot of religious books are. Jesus Christ never said, come up the ladder. He said, I am the ladder. I mean, you look at these guys. Look at all that they have. They have revelation from God. They have God saving them, miracles in their lives. Incredible things happen. And over, they screw it up again and again and again and again. And God works with them. He's not a God who says perform. He says, my Son, Jesus Christ, will come down. I will live. He will die for us. These Bible stories are not stories of role models, but of weak people like you and I, who have a strong God, who works for His people. God works with weak people. That's great news. That's wonderful news. Second good news, God works through weak people. Not just with them, but through them. Laban really hurt Leah. He really did. I mean, he really messed her up. Jacob didn't do much better. He really didn't. And Laban really messed Jacob around. But God worked through that in their lives. It was because of what Laban did in his cunning that Jacob finally began to learn something. Jacob finally began to get humbled. Later in Jacob's life, he turns into a pretty balanced guy. But it took this, and God working through that, for him to get a taste of his own medicine, for him to be humble, and for him to develop some character and some responses and some attitudes that he needed to do. He realized what was happening to him was exactly what he had been doing. And it, later he finally began to get some perspective. God works through weak people. Right now there's a Laban in your life. There's someone that's there. And instead of just screaming, God, why is this person in my life? You have to realize that God works not just with people, weak people, but through weak people. And then lastly, the third good news, with people, through people, but God is attracted to the weakest. I love this part of this story. God is attracted. It's kind of hard to talk about. I told the band I'd be done when I started crying, but I'm not done. It's astounding what happens with Leah. If you read your Bibles and you see the word Lord in capital, L-O-R-D, especially like the NIV or the NASB, that's the personal name of God, Yahweh. Anytime else you see Lord, and it's not all capital letters, it's usually Elohim, a common name for God. But Yahweh is a personal name. This is God's name that He gave to say, this is me promising that through your seed I'm going to change the planet. Okay? So when you see her calling on God, she's calling on Yahweh. And if you see it in your Bible, it's capital. So she's talking not to Elohim, this God that any religion would have talked to, but Yahweh, the Lord, the one who said, I have a promise. You're going to have a seed. You're going to have a descendant. And that descendant's going to change the entire world. And every place you see Yahweh or Lord, that's what that means. So here's Leah, she's floundering. Her life just sucks. I mean, not a life you would want for anyone. And she's floundering. And what does she do? She starts talking to Yahweh. She starts wondering, how do I get out of this? I know I'm homely. I knew in the world's eyes I was nothing. She heard the comments. She saw the looks and the lack of looks and saw them toward Rachel. And her answer is a child. And every time, my husband will save me. My husband will love me. But she calls on Yahweh. Where did she hear about that? Where did she get that promise? Somehow she understood this seed idea and started talking to God about that. And she began not just to believe in God in general at the top with a ladder that she had to submit to, which is, what everybody else in the world thought about that time. She began to grab hold of this idea of Yahweh, the God who will save me by grace. And what's fascinating about this is she turns to her husband. And by the fourth child, she says, I'm not naming him anything to do with whether he's going to listen to me, hear me, or be attached to me. I'm going to say, this is about Yahweh. I am going to praise. At the very end, it says that. Not my husband will love me, but now I'm going to praise God. And she conceives, and the son is named Judah. Through this suffering, she stopped trusting her husband. She stopped looking to her children to give her what she needed. She stopped looking to anything else, and she said, I am going to praise God, Judah. And look at this child. Who is this child that she gives birth to? It's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful story. It's an awesome story. This child, Judah, becomes the seed. And hundreds of years later, a descendant will come from Judah named Jesus Christ, the Lion of Judah, the tribe of Judah. And when Jesus spilt his blood on the cross, it was Leah's blood. When he cried tears, the DNA in those tears didn't come from Rachel. It came from Leah, because God chose her. And God said, I want the one not wanted. I love the one not loved. And all of Leah the ugly, Leah the unnoticed, Leah the not cared for, becomes Leah the seed. Leah the one through whom Christ is going to save the world. She becomes the mother of Jesus. That is our gospel. He wants the one that no one else wants. Let's have the band come up, and if you just bow your head. A lot of layers in which this works. And I don't know how it works on you. Boy, it just landed with me. It really did. You may think of yourself as a Leah. Maybe not physically, maybe just inside or some other way. And the gospel is very clear that God is attracted to the weakest. You may say, I'm not talented, I don't have a gift, I can't do this, I can't do that. And, moms, I think, get beat up with guilt, I think, a lot. Maybe not intending to, maybe, I don't know. God, I just thank you for the power of this story and how good this message is, how good this news is, how you work with weak people and even through weak people, but how you're attracted to the weakest. And I love how Leah has a place of prominence throughout history and throughout eternity. That in heaven, however all that works, that's her kid. More so than any other woman. Not to compare and didn't make her great or anything, but I love how you equal things. I love how you want the not wanted and how you love the one that's not loved. And so we come to you, And if you feel that way today, would you just open your heart to Christ? Would you just say, Jesus, thank you for wanting me that much? It's incredible that he does. And just receiving him into your heart, your life. Tell him you want to follow him. Yeah, you're weak. Yeah, you mess up. It doesn't excuse it. Sin does have effects, and he'll work with you, though. That's the good news. He'll work with you. And then just rejoice in that. And let's stand, and we'll close in song.